Regular," he objected. "It isn't shipshape. I should know whether you are under my command or not. For discipline, for organization. It should be cleared up. I shall put through an urgent inquiry." Joe looked at him incredulously. Lieutenant Commander Brown was a perfectly amiable man, but he had to have things in a certain pattern for him to recognize that they were in a pattern at all. He was more excited over the fact that he didn't know whether he ranked Joe than over the much more important matter of physical deterioration in the absence of gravity. Yet he surely understood their relative importance. The fact was, of course, that he could confidently expect exact instructions about the last, while he had to settle matters of discipline and routine for himself. "I shall ask for clarification of your status," he said worriedly. "It shouldn't have been left unclear. I'd better attend to it at once." He looked at Joe as if expecting a salute. He didn't get it. He clanked away, his magnetic shoe soles beating out a singularly martial rhythm. He must have practiced that walk in private. Joe got out of the airlock as another of the space barges was warped in. Brent, the crew's psychologist, joined him when he went to unload. Brent nodded in a friendly fashion to Joe. "Quite a change, eh?" he said dryly. "Sanford turned out to be a crackpot with his notions of grandeur. I'm not sure that Brown's notions of discipline aren't worse." Joe said, "I've something rather important to pass on," and told about the newly discovered physical effects of a long stay where there was no gravity. The doctors now predicted that anybody who spent 6 months without weight would suffer a deterioration of muscle tone which would make a return to Earth impossible without a long preliminary process of retraining. One's heart would adjust to the absence of any need to pump blood against gravity. "Which," said Joe, "means that you're going to have to be relieved before too long. But we brought up some gravity simulation harnesses that may help." Brent said desolately, "And I was so pleased. We all had trouble with insomnia at first, but lately we've all been sleeping well. Now I see why. Normally one sleeps because he's tired. We had trouble sleeping until our muscles got so weak we tired anyhow." Another drone came in and was unloaded, and another, but the last of them wasn't only unloaded. Haney took over the platform's control board and, grinning to himself, sent faint, especially tuned short-wave impulses to the steering rockets of the drone. The liquid-fuel rockets were designed to steer a loaded ship. With the airlock door open, the silvery ship leaped out of the dock like a frightened horse. The liquid-fuel rocket had a nearly empty hull to accelerate. It responded skittishly. Joe watched out a port as it went hurtling away. The vast Earth rolled beneath it. It sped on and vanished. Its fumes ceased to be visible. Joe told Brent, "Another nice job, that. We sent it backward, slowing it a little. It'll have a new orbit, independent of ours and below it. But come 60 hours, it will be directly underneath. We'll haul it up and refuel it. And our friends the enemy will hate it. It's a radio repeater. It'll pick up short-wave stuff beamed to it and repeat it down to Earth. And they can try to jam that." It was a mildly malicious trick to play. Behind the Iron Curtain, broadcasts from the free world couldn't be heard because of stations built to emit pure noise and drown them out. But the jamming stations were on the enemy nation's borders. If radio programs came down from overhead, jamming would be ineffective, at least in the center of the nations. Populations would hear the truth, even though their governments objected. But that was a minor matter, after all. With spaceship hulls coming into being by dozens, and with one convoy of hundreds of tons of equipment gotten aloft, the whole picture of supply for the platform had changed. Part of the new picture was 2 devices that Haney and the Chief were assembling. They were mostly metal backbone and a series of tanks, with rocket motors mounted on ball and socket joints. They looked like huge red insects, but they were officially rocket recovery vehicles, and Joe's crew referred to them as space wagons. They had no cabin, but something like a saddle. Before it there was a control board complete with radar screens. And there were racks to which solid-fuel rockets of diverse sizes could be attached. They were literally short-range towcraft for travel in space. They had the stripped, barren look of farm machinery. So the name Space Wagon fitted. There were 2 of them. "We're putting the pair together," the chief told Joe. "Looks kinda peculiar." "It's only for temporary use," said Joe. "There's a bigger and better one being built with a regular cabin and hull, but some experience with these 2 will be useful in running a regular space tug." The chief said with a trace of too much casualness, "I'm kind of looking forward to testing this." "No," said Joe doggedly. "I'm responsible. I take the first chance. But we should all be able to handle them. When this is assembled, you can stand by with the second one. If the first one works all right, we'll try the second." The chief grimaced, but he went back to the assembly of the spidery device. Joe got out the gravity simulator harnesses. He showed Brent how they worked. Brown hadn't official instructions to order their use, but Joe put one on himself, set for full Earth gravity simulation. He couldn't imitate actual gravity, of course, only the effect of gravity on one's muscles. There were springs and elastic webbing that pulled one's shoulders and feet together, so that it was as much effort to stand extended, with one's legs straightened out, as to stand upright on Earth. Joe felt better with a pull on his body. Brent was upset when he found that to him more than 1/10 of normal gravity was unbearable. But he kept it on at that. If he increased the pull a very little every day, he might be able to return to Earth in time. Now it would be a very dangerous business indeed. He went off to put the other members of the crew in the same sort of harness. After 10 hours, a second drone broadcaster went off into space. By that time, the articulated red frameworks were assembled. They looked more than ever like farm machinery, save that their bulging tanks made them look insectile too. They were actually something between small towboats and crash wagons. A man in a spacesuit could climb into the saddle of one of these creations, plug in the airline of his suit to the crash wagon's tanks, and travel in space by means of the space wagon's rockets. These weird vehicles had remarkably powerful magnetic grapples. They were equipped with steering rockets as powerful as those of a ship. They had banks of solid-fuel rockets of diverse power and length of burning. And they even mounted rocket missiles, small guided rockets which could be used to destroy what could not be recovered. They were intended to handle unmanned rocket shipments of supplies to the platform. There were reasons why the trick should be economical, if it should happen to work at all. When they were ready for testing, they seemed very small in the great space lock. Joe and the chief very carefully checked an extremely long list of things that had to work right or nothing would work at all. That part of the job wasn't thrilling, but Joe no longer looked for thrills. He painstakingly did the things that produced results. If a sense of adventure seemed to disappear, the sensations of achievement more than made up for it. They got into spacesuits. They were in an odd position on the platform. Lieutenant Commander Brown had avoided Joe as much as possible since his arrival. So far, he'd carefully avoided giving him direct orders, because Joe was not certainly and officially his subordinate. Lacking exact information, the only thing a conscientious, rank-conscious naval officer could do was exercise the maximum of tact and insistently ask authority for a ruling on Joe's place in the hierarchy of rank. Joe flung a leg over his eccentric, red-painted mount. He clipped his safety belt, plugged in his suit air supply to the space wagon's tanks, and spoke into his helmet transmitter. "Okay to open the lock. Chief, you keep watch. If I make out all right, you can join me. If I get in serious trouble, come after me in the ship we rode up. but only if it's practical. Not